What's good, Confessions family? I hope that everyone has been trying to maintain in these streets called life. It's been such a journey for your girl. I apologize for being away for so long, but life often gets in the way. For those of you who don't follow my social media platforms, first, why not? Okay. Second, I decided to go into private practice full time. It was not an easy decision for me because I don't do well with uncertainty. However, at the same time, a 9 to 5 is never certain. I've been struggling because as I grow older, each job that I have obtained, it doesn't really feel like a good fit. It's hard to stay in a place where you already feel you don't belong. The jobs I have had, I thought I wanted because um, they would help me get up the corporate ladder. But how many of you know that often the corporate ladder does not give you the fulfillment that you have been yearning for? I know that we need money and have to keep businesses afloat, but somewhere along the way, I feel like these organizations forgot the empathy. Um, they forgot the why, right? Because all businesses started for a reason. It was to solve a problem, right? But when you get into capitalism, the problem becomes second to the money. So I finally listened to God and jumped out there on faith. And y'all, your girl has no idea what she is doing, but I am taking it one step at a time. So, Resiliently You Counseling and Consultation Services LLC is open full time for therapeutic services, clinical supervision, business consultation, and training, and so much more, right? A big deal, some would say, right? At least I thought it was until I started using logic. For the first day, I felt a great sense of relief, but as days grew on, um, I started to question. I started to think about like my financial obligations. I started to feel this sense of insecurity, right? And for me, that's a big deal. So I had to I sat down and looked at monthly expenses. Um, for my husband, I can plug in his income no problem, right? For me, I just kept putting question marks. I had to give myself some credit though because I've never used budgets before, and now it's a regular occurrence. So I sat and tried to figure out how much projected income I had from my caseload, and where I needed to be in order to make um, ends meet. So then I'm sure you can guess what happened next. So more panic, more worry. I said I have to make this work. I can't disappoint my family. So I did what every person starts to do: search for a new job. I found a few that could be potentially promising and others that did not align with my current lifestyle. Right, I have two girls. I have to make sure that I'm available for some of their activities, as well as just being present as a parent, as a wife, um, as a daughter to my mother. So, I think the biggest thing for me is I had to kind of weigh the pros and cons, right? Go through the actions. But when I was looking at these positions, none of them felt like me, right? I didn't feel like I had the freedom to kind of do what I want to do, what I envision. And then, so how many of you know that times are not like those of the past, right? Where our parents would like pick a job, stay at a job, work it for 40 plus years and hated it. So I said, I'm just not going to take anything, right? Unless I am extremely destitute. And well, I don't think I have hit destitute, at least in my mind, I haven't. So for us, we want everything instant, and life is not instant. And I had to come to that realization. Anything we want has to be built little by little. So I had to tell myself several times that you have to trust the process. However, when you're a girly who tries to control your environment, it's hard. I kept saying, what is the definition of process anyway? So I looked it up. And according to Webster, process is a series of actions, steps, or changes performed to achieve a specific goal, result, or product. The keywords that stuck out to me were action, steps, and changes. I asked myself, what steps can be taken? What action can you put in place? What changes can you make? Because you got a mortgage, sis, a home that needs repairs, and you didn't anticipate that. And as I sat and continued to apply logic, I said, girl, you are foolish to think that you can do this. You need a stable check. I felt like I was letting my family down and told my kids, like I felt like a failure. The main goal in life is to survive it, right? But I don't want to just survive it, I want to thrive through it. And I think that this decision is probably one of the biggest decisions I've ever made in my life. And it leaves me completely vulnerable, totally uncomfortable, feeling that, leaves me worried. So I'm forever grateful for my husband. Shout out to him. Our anniversary is coming up April 13th. So we're the lucky 13 on the 13th. But I'm grateful for him because no matter how crazy my ideas are, he supports me. He is there to give me the rational, but also there to give me the spiritual. So he kept telling me, "You gotta trust God, babe. You gotta trust God." And I have to be completely honest. I kept asking myself, "How do you trust God when there's so many things stacked against you?" Then I reflected back to the days when I was carefree and 10 toes down in my faith, right? Somehow, some way, I lost that edge. So a day or two later, I sat and just stared at the wall. Yes, literally, just stared at the wall, y'all. I said, Self, now you know that you and God have been rocking and rolling since a young age. You came to know Him for yourself at the age of 13, and He has carried you through a many of days, from school to protection from disease, because I was out there young and wild, right? From finding housing when I didn't know where I was going to stay, and just so many other things. Um, so I then looked at the picture of my grandma Eva, um, who you never knew what was going on, um, or what she was going through because she kept her faith strong. And so I said, Ma, how did you do it? how did you trust God through the process? And the next day, I said to myself, just keep doing the work. Let God figure out the rest. So I've been trying to get my marketing together, right? I've been trying to network more, agreeing to like speaking engagements, agreeing to different vendor things, and being at ease with what I am doing. This was not an easy task because all I kept thinking about was how can we make the dollars roll in? The epiphany was to go back to the basics: pray, read your word, and fast. So I committed to reading Psalms every day, at least one verse, right? And some may say, well, why Psalms? And listen, I I need to brush up on my spiritual stuff here, guys. Don't judge me, but I always remember they said that the book of Psalms was a book of prayers. And as I began to be obedient, God reminded me through Jeremiah 29 and 11, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, right? Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. For a week straight, this passage popped up on my timeline. It came through friends and family and through a sermon. And I said, okay, God, I hear you, bruh. Um, but what hit home was plans to prosper you, right? The pastor said in their sermon that prosper doesn't always mean financially, but it means to bring peace, right? Peace of mind is the biggest reward. So my prayer to God has been to use me for His will and not my own. But my thoughts kept getting in the way, and I felt He had to remind me that His way is not my way, right? And that His will over my life will look different from my logic. So I posed the question to myself: what happens when it's you versus you? What happens when you get in your own way? What happens when you talk yourself down or don't believe in yourself and your abilities? So, I know, double standard, right? Because as a therapist, I'm always telling folks to choose self and seek self validation, which I wholeheartedly believe in. But what happens when your self turns against you, right? The internal battle that the mind has with itself is something I don't think I'll ever clearly understand, but I get it, right? So, your fight with logic versus faith is something I am still learning because faith tells us to basically believe in something that you can't see, believe in something that does not make sense, right? And logic tells us that it has to make sense. But if you are going to exercise logic, you can't live in faith. You have to take the steps, actions, and changes necessary and believe, you know, that the rest will align. So that is my current journey. That is why I sat down and said, you haven't done your podcast in a while, right? You haven't poured into yourself. Get back to doing that. You haven't been consistent with your social media posting. Get back to doing that. So, whatever you set out to do and haven't done, get back to that. Faith only works when you do it, right? Um, so, Confessions family, I now pose the question to you: What did you lose along the way that you need to get back to, right? To balance the battle that you are having with yourself. Things won't always line up the way you want them to or the way you envisioned, but eventually the product will be there. Quiet the mind, tap into the spirit, and trust your process. Okay? That's all I got, y'all. That's all I got. So until next time, Confessions family, remember to be true to yourself, and the world will align. Y'all have a good one.